Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good evening. It is Monday night, August the 6th. It's 9:30 p.m. here in Calgary, Alberta, and I'm glad to be here and glad to be able to do the show. I missed last week's show, and I'm trying to do at least one show a week with guests or without guests, and just trying to continue on. I do like to speak out against child abuse, and this is like I've almost done 900 shows here, and I've done other Blog Talk Radio shows as well. So I've probably done about 1,500 shows in the last 2 years, or 2.5 years anyway. And yeah, it's something it's really heavy on my heart. You know, kids are being abused, and there's just nothing anybody can do about it. And as much money gets pumped into the system to try to fix the situation, it doesn't seem to be making all that much of a difference. You know, kids are still suffering, kids are still being abused, and it's horrible. You know, it's just mind-boggling. You know, like how are we going to fix this? Why are people doing this? It's been going on since time began, and you know, it's got to stop. People need to change their perception and the way that they feel about children. Like, children were not put here to abuse, you know, or to neglect, or to sexually use, or you know, for any of those purposes. And children have the right to life. You know, they have the right to first of all to life, to live. Second of all, to a good life. You know, they have the right to protection, to safety, to shelter, food, adequate clothing, adequate food, adequate health care. You know, they have all these human rights that are afforded to all of us as human beings here on the planet, and yet they're being taken away. And then when it comes to the system, you know, to the judicial system and the prosecutors and the people that are out here, you know, after a child has been seriously injured or killed or removed from the home, you know, they just treat this like it's no big deal. You know, this is a child's life we're talking about. This is not an inanimate object. This is a child's life, and it's frustrating. It's really frustrating. You know, it's like, what's the answer? People need to change the way they feel about children. They really do, worldwide. It's not something that's just, oh, it's only a North American issue, or oh, it's only an issue over in some other part of the world. You know, this is a worldwide issue. It's been happening since time began, and people need to change what they're doing. They need to change and stop abusing children. You know, and it's like, how do you get people to do that? What I think is really interesting, I just sort of want to talk here tonight, just off on a tangent. You know, like I sit here and I think about this stuff all the time, and you know, I mean, I'm busy, right? Like I'm doing all kinds of stuff, studying and working on some degrees and some counseling certificates and everything else, and working full time now again. And my sweetheart, you know, I have a life outside of this too, right? But you know, this is always sitting on the back of my mind, because I know what it's like for these kids out here, because, you know, growing up abused, I know what they're going through, you know, or somewhat similar situations, you know what I mean? And I sit here and I think, yeah, like, why do people think that they can do this to children? And then why, when these perpetrators of the crimes, these parents or caregivers or whoever it is that's abused the child, has got, you know, were found, you know, 100% guilty beyond a shadow of a doubt, whether it's, you know, murder of a child or abuse of some type, and they're hauled into court. Why are the courts even treating these people as if they are sane? No one in their right mind would sexually use a child, right? No one in their right mind would hurt a child on purpose or kill a child on purpose, or even on accident. You know what I mean? There's no excuse for this stuff, and yet it happens every day. And there's, you know, people are hauled into court. You see these cases on TV, you see them in the newspaper and on the internet and wherever you're watching your nightly news or your daily news, you know. And it's like, these people, why are the courts even treating these people as if they're sane? These people, you have to be insane to do something like that to a child. You really do. There has to be something completely wrong with somebody who would hurt a child on purpose, intentionally, you know, abuse a child, or, you know, kill a child or maim a child on purpose, sexually use a child, you know. And then all these people have all these lame excuses. You know, when you watch the cases and you see what's going on with the cases, whether, you know, it doesn't matter. It could be a teacher, a coach. It's not just parents. You know, it's like a neighbor, anybody who's gotten a hold of a child and abused a child, or and then it ended up killing the child or whatever. They always have these really pathetic excuses. You know, it's like you sit here and you're thinking, and the courts are treating these people as if they're sane, and they're affording them rights that these monsters did not afford to the children, that they ruined their lives or killed them, you know, or murdered them. You know, this is absolutely unacceptable. It just gets to you after a while, because you're sitting here thinking, why do people do these things to children? I will never understand. As a survivor myself, you know, I did a show last night on Spreaker, and just talking about, you know, the question of why. Why do people, you know, there's no excuse for lashing out at a child and beating a child, burning a child, tying a child up and not feeding them for, you know, 6 months, right? Or, you know, whatever people do to children, which we know is truth and reality for so many children. Why? Why are these people doing these things? It's a sickness. It's an absolute sickness. There's so many sick people out here bringing children into the world and then making these children pay. You know, that's what happened to me, right? I mean, my parents were both sick individuals, you know, and they decided to pop out 7 kids that lived. It would have been more had they lived. But, you know, they didn't want these children, you know, and then made us pay for it, and then made us feel bad because we lived. We were like, we were there. We were causing them grief, you know, because we actually lived and survived, and actually they had to bother to look after us, you know, or to attempt to anyway. And that's what so many people do. They have children and they just, you know, these sick individuals, you know, these abusers, you know, they didn't want the child in the first place. You know, it's so sad for these kids out here, you know, and if these kids actually, you know, live and survive the abuse, you know, they're going to go on to face all kinds of difficulties in life until they figure it out that it wasn't their fault, and that, you know, they're going to have to find some way of making peace, you know, within, to understand, you know, that, yeah, what happened to them, and that life, you know, does go on, but it's a challenge. I was talking about it on Spreaker last night, and you know, it's frustrating. You just see these people sitting in these courtrooms, you know, and these questions coming to them, you know, like why would you do this to your child? You know, and half of them have these really pathetic excuses, and then the other half don't have anything to say at all. You know, you see some of these people in these courtroom sessions where they just have this blank look on their face, like they're not sane. They couldn't possibly be sane to be doing what they did to their children or to somebody else's child, whether it's their own or somebody else's, right? So I think it's just a matter of the fact that the world is a very sick place. We already know that. There's a lot of people running around thinking it's great and wonderful, but I don't know where they've been. You know, so not in reality, because all you have to do is take a look around and you can see it's a pretty ill, sick place, right? And it can be good if you're just one of these people that's just managed to escape the reality of hardship and abuse and domestic violence and drug abuse and murder and you know, suicide. You know, if you've managed to skirt around that stuff, then maybe you might think life is pretty good and all that stuff just happens on TV. But in reality, that was my life. That's just my life, you know what I mean? Not now, but it was as a child, as a youth, and as a teenager, and all the way up until I decided to change my life, to as an adult, to not follow suit and not do as my family had done, which was to go on some sort of self-destruct mode after growing up in this abusive hellhole. So, you know, these kids out here, you see these children, you know, you think, my God, like how are they going to do it? Many of them can't, you know. Not all of them will go on to abuse their own children, but some will. Not all of them will go on to abuse somebody else's child, but some will. You know, if they don't get themselves straightened out and stop the cycle of abuse, which was what I was talking about on Spreaker last night. But, you know, it's frustrating because it's like, how do we do this? You know, if there was an answer, it would have been done a long time ago, at least within the last 50 years. You know, but it's obvious that there is no real answer except for that people need to stop abusing children. And that just doesn't just mean parents, it just means anybody who has the idea in their mind to use and abuse a child for whatever reason, whether it's their own or somebody else's, needs to stop. And how do you get these monsters to stop? Exactly, right? I mean, my mom couldn't get my dad to stop abusing her, just shy of murdering him, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, she bashed him in the head, and he wouldn't stop. He was hell-bent on abusing her, you know? I mean, when somebody's going to abuse you, there isn't much you can do to stop it. You know what I mean? As the victim in the situation, you know? I mean, maybe the police can stop him if they can get a hold of him, but it's, or her. It's a serious situation, you know, and how do you get people, you know, how do you get people to stop, to change the way that they think and to change the way that they feel about children? It's a serious situation out here because there's so many children today, you know, who are being abused, who are being abused by someone who doesn't look at them as a human being. They see them as an object that's there primarily and foremost for their use and their pleasure to do whatever they want. And they don't care if they cause that child pain. They don't care if they kill that child. A lot of them, they don't care if what they do hurts that child because that is their source of whatever it is that they feel they need. Whether it's to just use that child as a punching bag, whether it is to just use that child as a verbal punching bag, you know, and whether it's just to get your jollies off and sexually use the child. This is what people are doing. And they don't think about the consequences because they don't care. They care about numero uno, which is themselves. So abusers are very, very self-centered people. They only care about themselves. My dad only cared about himself. He did not care about his wife. He did not care that he hurt her. He did not care that he hurt his children. It didn't matter to him. It still doesn't. He's like almost 100 years old and he's still alive. And I don't talk to him. He's too toxic. We're too toxic for each other. No relationship whatsoever except for an abusive one, so we can't get along. So we can't have any contact. And I just refuse to let him around me because I'm like done with that. You know what I mean? But he never ever did change his tune. But if somebody was to ask him, do you love your children? I've heard this before from him. He would say, oh, yes, I love my children. I love my wife. But what? You know, really? Okay. No, so he just only says it to look good to somebody else, okay? I know abusers. Both my parents were abusers. My mom, same thing. She only, when my parents were hauled into court for child abuse charges, and they were arrested and brought up on charges, both of them at the same time, they had to go to court. And my mom was telling the judge, you know, don't take my children, they're all I have. I love my children, pleading and crying to the judge, you know. And the judge was like, well, you guys, you know, you can't keep on the way you're going. We're going to have to remove the children because you guys are, you know, you're hurting your children, you're abusing your children. We're going to have to remove them. My mom was like, please don't take my babies. Well, that's the only reason she did that. She didn't want us. And she literally told me this to my face at the age of 29 years old, which just a few years before she passed away, that she didn't want us. She never wanted us. And I said, you've got to be kidding. She already knew this, but I wanted to hear her say why. I wanted to force it out of her. I said, you have to be kidding me. Like, you put us through this for what? For nothing. You could have let us go when you guys were in court and they were going to take us out of the home. You could have let us go. And she said, you meant nothing to me. Absolutely nothing. You know why she did that? For the judge, and put on that little show with her tears and, oh, I love my children. Don't take my children away. They're all I have. Because she did not want to look like a bad person to that judge. That's the only reason. She did not love her children. She did not want her children. She just didn't want to look like a bad mother. Okay? Even on her deathbed, she said, oh, I've been such a bad mother. She didn't say, I'm so sorry for what I did to you. I'm so sorry that I didn't protect you from your dad. I'm sorry I didn't protect you from your brother. I'm sorry I didn't protect you, period. I'm sorry I abused you. No. She was going to take no responsibility for that. So she instead, you know, throws it back on the whole being a bad mother thing. And that's what abusers will do. They really don't feel remorse for what they do to children, whether it's their own or somebody else's, because they don't care. They have no capacity to care about that child or those children. They don't care. They don't see them as as a human being. They just see them as an object. Have a bad day, beat on your kid. End up horny, sexually use your kid or somebody else's, because they're there for your gratification. They're not human beings. They're just these objects that are there for these abusers to abuse and to mistreat and to do whatever they're going to do. And this has got to change. And how do you change a society that is so sick and so ill? How do you get people to change the way they feel about children and the way they treat children? It's a serious situation for these kids out here, and it breaks my heart, because I know, that there's no easy answer to this. And billions of dollars can keep continually being pumped into this thing, and it isn't going to change one bit. Because people will still abuse children because they do not care. Plain and simple. And they don't even care when they go to jail. Half of those people that end up in jail, or I'd say at least a good portion of them, especially the women, go to jail, do their time, lose their kids, come back out, meet somebody else, have another kid, and end up abusing that child, and then end up back in jail, and then do the same thing again and again and again. And who pays the price for that? Those children do. People think it's not that big of a deal. I can kind of see how somebody might think that it's not that big of a deal. Oh, well, you were abused as a child. Get over it. Life goes on. It's like, okay, really, does it? When, the only way that I could potentially ever be completely okay with it is if I could just make up some false childhood for myself. I could just pretend, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, it was great, it was wonderful, I had the most best parents in the whole world, and it was wonderful, and I have no hang-ups. Like I'm screwed because of what my parents did to me and what my brother did to me. But I manage quite well because I'm sane, you know what I mean? I don't blame other people in the world for my issues. You know what I mean? I know where it comes from, where it stems from. I work on getting a lot of information to help myself, and I have a lot of friends who support me, so it's great. But the thing is it's still with me, and it always will be, because it forms my personality. It caused me to hate. The abuse that I suffered as a child, and I'm sure that there's other children out here who will experience the same thing. If it goes on year after year after year, pretty well, I'm not talking about a spanking one time or, a kid getting grounded or something. I'm talking about continual, habit forming kind of, sustained abuse within a home that just keeps going on and on and on. That child's personality will be changed. It will develop into whatever it needs to protect itself and to survive within that environment. And for me, eventually it turned into hatred. Hatred towards everything. Myself, life, my parents, which I thought I really hated them, but I discovered that I didn't. But I hated what they did. I still even today don't hate them. I just hated what they did. And I hated the fact that they destroyed our family and then sit back and take no responsibility for it. That's what I really hate. And it's, it's not them personally that I hate, or my brother. He killed himself. I mean, it's a sad situation. My brother sexually used me. It's like he killed himself. He killed himself trying to get his jollies off in one of those choking things, sexual situations. He was sick. He was mentally ill. Like the guy, he was abused. He grew up in the same family I did. We were all really so devastated by what my parents put us through, psychologically, emotionally, and in every way. And it's like these little kids out here, today who are being abused. I know I know what's going to happen to them. And I know how serious and how bad this can get. And how horrific it is for these kids who won't make it, first of all, and won't have the opportunity to try to have a decent life. And I know kids who were abused growing up who didn't make it, And it's a harsh situation for so many people. It's not. This life is not some great place. This world we live in is not some wonderful place. I can see the good too. I can see goodness because I've seen evil, so I know good when I see it. It's like I know that there's good people and there's good stuff on this earth, but a lot of people like to pretend that it's just all good and that this stuff just doesn't even exist. And in the meantime, tonight we have so many children who will be abused in some way, will be murdered, will be sexually abused, molested, trafficked, exploited, child pornography. I mean, we're talking so many children tonight. And tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day. And this is what drives me absolutely crazy, is because I sit here and I think how many children, are going to suffer needlessly at the hands of somebody who just thinks that there's some sort of object for them to use and abuse and mistreat. We got to, that's what I'm saying. Like, people need to change the way that they feel about children. And be very cautious when dealing with children and realize that these children are counting on the people around them to look after them, in the best way that they can. Do the right things by children, right? So, I sit here and I think about this stuff all the time, and because I know what it's like. So it's not going to ever really go away unless, like I said, unless I want to pretend that it never happened, which I refuse to do. I just can't do that. It's too ingrained in my personality. Every day I go through a portion of my old self, which is from so long ago, which was such a huge part of my personality, of this hatred, this disgust, this total disgust for excuse me, my voice is going, for what my parents did to each other, to our family, for what my brother did to me, and it's just this inner, I guess, rage sort of thing that never really goes away. It's always there in the background. On the other hand, I've come a long way. Like, I'm almost 50. I'm getting closer to 50 every year. And, I've got a pretty decent life set up for myself right now. You know what I mean? Like I'm blessed, right? I mean, I know it could be so much worse, And I see these people out here. I live downtown Calgary, and I see, I'll be walking home from work or something, walking home from the bus or something, and I'll see, people, crack prostitutes, out there hooking for drugs and stuff. And I think, what a life, those guys have. Like, that sucks. I know when I was 20, 21, 22, I was hanging around with a lot of drug users, and I knew girls who were doing that stuff. And for me, I couldn't let anybody touch me because I was sexually abused at 8 years old, so I wouldn't let anybody touch me, period. So that was never an option for me. I just worked for my drugs. And I just worked to support my drug habit. I used to work a lot. I worked like 2 or 3 jobs a lot of times. And just stayed up all the time. And so, by the age of 22, I was pretty burnt out. But I knew I had friends who were, hooking for drugs and had grown up abused. And I see these people out here today, these young people, and I think of what their lives are like and where they came from. And not all of them were possibly abused, you know what I mean? It could be a percentage, that grew up in an abusive home or just a very dysfunctional environment, or maybe they just weren't, a lot of neglect. Maybe the parent or caregiver just didn't care enough to help them out. And it's a sad situation. Like, my life is pretty good now, but I always and always will speak out against child abuse. This is something that, I don't mind speaking out against it. It doesn't cause me to be embarrassed or make me feel uncomfortable, or, that I should just shut up and go away or something. I really don't care who doesn't like it. I mean, we need to talk about this stuff, and this stuff needs to be front and center if we're going to stop child abuse. And we're not going to reach the people who are abusing children. They aren't going to care if they see a Stop Child Abuse ad. Someone who's going to go home and beat the shit out of their kid does not care about a Stop Child Abuse campaign. They really don't. But what that is for people like teachers, people who work around children, to look for the signs, look for the symptoms, be aware that it is happening. The caregivers aren't going to get the child any help. They're the ones that are abusing the child, whoever it is, right? Or whoever's gotten a hold of that child. So just, be aware of the signs, be aware of the symptoms, be aware of how to report it and how easily it is to screw up a court case for a child if you don't do it properly. There's proper ways to report it, proper ways, you can find that information all out, like on www.child welfare information gateway, child help, safe child, you name it. You just look around for the information, you can find it, right? And, Prevent Child Abuse America, there's so many. And get the information, learn how to look for the signs, especially if you have children, watch for signs. Even if you're not abusing your children doesn't mean somebody else is. And they, 1 in 3 to 4 girls, 1 in 6 to 7 boys will be sexually abused in some way under the age of 18. And, parents think, it would never happen to my child. Well, 1 in 3 to 4 girls and 1 in 6 to 7 boys. So get a grip. It does happen. It happens all the time. It happens in schools. It happens in daycares. It happens in babysitters. It happens at grandmas and grandpas. It happens with the aunts and uncles, and it happens with everybody. Sibling incest. You name it. Your child could be being abused right under your nose, and you may not even know it. Now, my mom knew about it because I told her that my brother was doing things to me at night, and it was causing me a lot of pain. And she knew what was going on, and she told me, well, that's not my problem, it's your problem. Wrap yourself up like a mummy when you go to bed. That was her answer to it, because my mother was my main abuser, so I wasn't going to get any help there. And she did not care, right, that my 21-year-old brother was sexually abusing me. So it can happen. Children aren't necessarily always being treated properly or being taken care of. So if you work around children or if you have children, know the signs and symptoms. Get your child some help, or get that child some help. No matter what you do, intervene, because if you don't, you may be the last person that sees that child alive, right? So make the phone call. Phone it in as a crime. Child abuse is a crime. It needs to be reported as a crime, not just to social services. Report it as a police, investigation. Absolutely. And, we have to do what we can to protect children. Have a great night, everybody. Take good care, and we'll talk to you again next week. Bye-bye.